From the John Navita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, October the 1st, the year 2014. And now, here they are, in person, Jim and Rich.
I was going to say,
we're not.
Did Kevin order that, or is that I wasn't expecting that.
We're not in person. We're actually pre-recorded.
Yeah, but we're in person right now. Can you hear me, Jim?
I can hear you.
I can hear you, too.
I guess that means we're both here.
It seems like you're just talking to me, and, I'm so used to these earmuffs now. It's just like talking and...
We go to Mariano's, and we have to put our headsets on.
Yes, folks, we left our whole show on the table at Mariano's last night. We have nothing to talk about.
We decided to get together for one of our things that we laughingly refer to as show prep, and by the time we decide what we're going to talk about and walk out the door of Mariano's, we've forgotten what we're going to talk about.
Jim, you know what, though? Jim and John, I got to run this by you, and seriously, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, Jim. I think part of the, not that it's a problem, because I love the conversation we have at Mariano's, but part of the problem is for us, our conversation, I think we always want it to be fresh, and so we can't replicate what we talked about at Mariano's, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, because it won't. You know what? We're not professional actors or anything, so it won't seem fresh to us.
No, and you know what? There's times I look for articles or some things that come along on the internet that I see during the week or two when we don't do the when in between when we record, and you think, oh, this is a good topic, but
then it loses something.
It loses something
over time.
It loses something. It loses something for maybe just because of time.
I think that's put it this way: we're talking. This is a Tuesday morning. Our show will be tomorrow morning on Wednesday at 7:30 to 8:30. So even if we talk to say about Sunday's Bears game, which we probably talk a little bit about, I mean that's already been talked to death between 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and 7:30 tomorrow morning. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Bear game.
Do you ever think, Jim? Do you ever think of what the unemployment rate in this country would be if you didn't have so many talking heads on radio and TV? Holy mackerel!
Man.
It would really go up.
That's right.
There's more hot air blowing around in this country than probably any other country in the world. It's unbelievable.
More hot air in this room than.
Well, at least we don't get paid. We're free hot air, But you know what? Considering what some of these bozos get paid, my free hot air is just as good as
anybody else's
hot air.
Just as good as anybody else's. I was kicking myself Sunday that I hadn't checked the football schedule before I agreed that Dana and her mother and I were going to go see a screening of Gone with the Wind in Woodridge, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the release of the film. But I think after all is said and done, I think I probably made the right choice.
You got the best of it if you saw Gone with the Wind.
Oh,
that's always good to see.
That's still, to me, one of the most perfect films ever made.
And if you would like to stand up, I'll kick you too. So
sometimes we just need it. I guess one of the questions I just want to ask
about Gone with the Wind.
No.
Oh, I thought you had a question about Gone with the Wind.
No. We can talk about Gone with. Maybe we have to get Ralph over here sometime, and we talk about Gone with the Wind.
He's dying to come over.
Yeah, we need to talk movies sometime with Ralph. How can you get almost 500 yards of total offense and only score 17 points out of it? I don't understand that. The Packers scored 38 offensive points on 47 plays on Sunday.
That's efficiency.
My God.
Do you ever think, though, Jim, that sometimes, I don't know if it's the league or whoever, I'm not saying there's any big conspiracy here, but Martellus Bennett said that on the play right before the first half ended, he felt he was in the end zone. Of course, any player is probably going to say, well, I wouldn't say they're all going to say that. I mean, he felt he was in. And it's amazing to me. My understanding is that especially when they first talked about having instant replay or the fact that you could throw the
challenge flag.
challenge flag, or that they were going to review every touchdown. I thought that I remembered at one time they were worried because instant replay, as presented by TV at that time, you could see 4 or 5 different angles. But they were going to be guaranteed that they would have more than that, okay? I don't know what the number was. Now, having said that, the excuse in the paper that the officials gave the Bears for not awarding the touchdown was that he was blocked by a Packer player. I mean, the view was blocked by a Packer player from them seeing it. And I'm thinking, with all these different camera angles, they couldn't get one where they could at least, see it more clearly than that? Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that amazing.
And I find that to be bogus. And you know what? On the face of it, it's downright BS. There's something wrong right there. But the papers are.
I would be curious to know I'd be curious to find out how the officials graded out for this game, because you had this play, you had some penalty calls that everybody is still scratching their heads about.
Well, now obviously we get ridiculous on this show once in a while, but here's my question. Other than the ones that everybody knows, like the muscle guy and Burl Toller used to be there, there's some officials
Red Cashin and first down.
But who the heck knows who these officials are? For all we know, we could be going back to the days when they used to get the sports writers to actually be the officials of the game, and then Irv Kupcinet would officiate the game, and then he'd write the story about the game. And, who knows who these guys are? Right. I mean, they say that they're the real officials. Who knows who they are? They might be high school guys.
All your TV crews, including us at Ridgewood, they not only have cameras down on the field, but they have cameras up in the press box.
Right.
Now, Friday night, we had a camera right outside the window by you, Jim.
Right.
We had one in the visitors box, and we had one down below, down near the field.
Right.
So there's no excuse. I mean, and like I was just telling before we went on the air, this replay stuff equipment is expensive, I presume. I don't know that much about it, but this were the umpire was blocked. His view was blocked by a Packer player. I don't buy that.
I don't buy it either.
John,
because there's
not at all.
Because all these production companies, they all have at least 4 or 5 cameras that cover the field.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess going back to your original question though, Jim, I know that touchdown, of course, didn't happen. There was another play with Josh Morgan where his description, and I'm going by what I read a day ago. He said he thought he had the pylon, and apparently he didn't. And he said, well, if he knew that he had missed the pylon, he would have obviously taken another route. Felt he would have gotten the end zone. I guess then the offense stalled on the 1, and we settled for a field goal. And then there was another play where Alshon Jeffrey said that he thought he probably should have caught a pass that he didn't hold on to that was also in the end zone. So, to say we only had 17 points and maybe point the finger at, the offense not being efficient in the red zone is probably not not accurate.
Well, they didn't even get in the second half. They didn't even get in the red zone.
Oh, that's the problem too.
And I think
the games ended at the halftime as far as the Bears was concerned.
And I think there was a lot of criticism of the defense on Sunday that said that was basically non-existent.
I have to say, Mel Tucker is a marked man in this city, and I think he has been since probably the day he was hired. And I don't really know that. put it this way. I think the defense at this point is still a work in progress. We have a mixture of veteran players and some very young players, and a lot of times that's a good mix. And maybe so far this has not worked, but I would say after 4 games, for people to be throwing their hands up in the air and saying this, that, or the other thing, you know what? In 4 weeks, let's say after 8 games, I think then let's see where we are at the halfway point in the season.
You get to the bye week, and I think you have an idea of what your team is like.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bears are a little bit later bye week than some of these others. You realize the last time the Bears gained 496 yards and lost was in 1979.
Boy, you know what, Jim?
They lost to the Vikings 30-27.
I saw a lot of those types of statistics in the paper yesterday, and I'm like, boy, somebody was really busy looking at all of these, what I would consider sort of meaningless statistics. I mean, so what? The last time they had that many yards and lost the game. What do I care what happened in 1979? Unless we decide to talk about 1979.
Here's one that'll even take you farther back. The last time they gained more than 496 yards and lost was 1947. In back-to-back.
So what was the first? I thought that was the first.
That was the last time they did that.
And what was
that they gained more than 496 yards and lost was 1947. They lost back-to-back games to the Rams and the Cardinals that cost Sid Luckman a chance at another championship.
Well, don't forget, once you start talking about, gaining 500 yards, it also means you're possessing the ball more and you have more chances to make mistakes. So you could be getting a lot of yards, but if you're fumbling, intercepting, dropping passes and whatnot, 500, it's a great stat, I guess, but it also, you have to look at the other side. There's a lot of risk involved because obviously you're possessing the ball, you're running a lot of plays, you're gaining a lot of yards. Also gives you a chance to make more mistakes.
Yeah, well. Martellus Bennett is on a pace for 116 receptions this year.
Yeah, well, Jim, how long have you and I been looking at sports pages? You can take, for every pace somebody's been on that they never achieved, I wish I had a buck. We do that.
We'd be
in good shape.
Consider.
So, he's having a great start of the season.
He's having a great season. I think that's great. I like Martellus. He's a character when you hear him talk. He's a good ball player.
Mm-hmm. He's fine.
He's fine.
He's fine. He's
right.
good.
He's fine.
He's fine. I'm not going to get all shook up about the Bears. Let's.
Have you had any meatball talks with anybody? Has Sports Jimmy climbed out onto the ledge?
Sports Jimmy has moved out to Byron, Illinois.
Really?
Yeah. So I haven't seen him. He the last conversation I had with him, he said he's got to get his life together. He's got a friend out in Byron who's, Jimmy. Actually, I really, and I didn't run this by you or John, but I had a conversation with Jimmy one day, and I know I'm digressing a little bit, and we talked about racing cars. He's into not NASCAR or IndyCar, but the drag racing. And Jimmy is really knowledgeable about this stuff. He actually did it at one point in his life. And I'm not very knowledgeable, but I'm interested. And he would have actually been a good guest to talk about something like that, where you got into the real how they set these cars up and what they do that with those cars that would be, say, different from your normal everyday on the street car. But at any rate, he has a friend in Byron that he's going to live with, and he just said that he needed to get his act together. I think he was getting frustrated with the fact that he hasn't worked for a long time. So he's, you never know. He may pop back into the scene again, but he's been gone for a little over a week, so I haven't talked to him at all.
Well, good luck to him.
Yeah.
Good luck to him. I thought,
one of our, just like a lot of other radio shows, he's one of our, he's not in our cast of characters, but he's one of our, our mentions almost on a weekly basis.
He was kind of a regular mention. I mean, I was kind of laughing Friday night at the Ridgewood game when Jimmy Sunshine made his grand entrance, and he was one that makes a grand exit too.
Yeah, when I saw him the next day, I said, Jim, geez, if you're cold, come up in the box. And, sometimes I think either Jim is willfully ignorant or he is the one with the hearing problem because he was always cold. I had to leave. I go, well, it's a little warmer in the box, Jim. There's no wind or anything. But I guess he just didn't get that concept. So
I think he's afraid we're going to
make him get on the air.
He's going to have to actually say something, or we're going to make some comment, and he won't be able to respond to us.
I'll tell you what, though, you and I have talked about it, and if we were going to have a third guy in the chair, anywhere, he'd probably be the guy because he's, really he's very witty. He holds his own in a conversation, and actually, even though he will protest and say, "I don't have any knowledge of, football or what you're talking about," actually, Jim has some good insights because he's got he doesn't get caught up, I think, in the personalities of the game. He just sees the game for what it is.
He watches the game. We look and we can talk about stories or players or whatever. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of friends of mine, Steve and Scott. Steve, I've talked to you before, and I refer to him as Stat Boy.
Yeah, Stat Boy. Okay.
Scott is an interesting character. Scott actually left the financial analyst world, and he's studying to become an Episcopalian priest.
Oh, wow.
But we get together periodically, and we refer to ourselves. Well, I won't give the acronym because John will take the cross out and dial 911 and get the priest on the line here. But we refer to ourselves, our organization, as we call ourselves, as the Dorky United Methodist Boys and Statistical Swashbucklers. If you take the first letter of each word, you'll figure out who we are.
Oh, I'm having trouble. I got as far as Dorky United Methodist Boys and something Swashbucklers.
Statistical Swashbucklers.
Okay, so now I know. Okay, now I'm getting it.
Yeah,
okay.
You got it? Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we all have, when we go to watch a game, it's like we all have our own specific functions that we do.
That's interesting.
Steve has the stats and analyzes everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come up with stories about players and things, and Scott waxes philosophical about the game, the beauty of everything. We keep telling him he gets very Frank DeFord-like with that. So,
Grantland Rice.
Yeah, there you go. We keep telling him we're expecting him to show up in a game in a, tweed sport coat and an ascot and have a little pencil-thin Frank DeFord mustache.
Well, one of the things that sort of aggravates me about this industry that we're very much on the fringes of, we're very small time, obviously, but I think I mentioned to you one time I'm looking at the Sun-Times, and they had a nice article that I was at first not going to read. But then I decided to read it. It was about, I think it was the fifth, I don't know if it was the 40th or 50th anniversary. I guess it would have been the 50th anniversary of Monday Night Football. 50 maybe?
No, it's 40. 1970 it started.
Okay, so I think that would have been then
so
the 40th
you're coming
anniversary.
up on the 44 years. What is it? 45 years.
Okay, this would have been a few years ago. So it was the 40th anniversary broadcast. And then they described about everything, a lot of the things that went into the broadcast. And one of the things they said, as far as the announcers went, is they named, let's just say it was 12 or 15 storylines that they went into the game with, and obviously they didn't use them all. They get into 3 or 4. And then as I watched games after that, and I think I realized that prior to that, but it made me focus on that. So as I listened to games after that, I realized that the announcers had their storylines, and I'm thinking to myself, the storyline that you have may be totally lost by what happens in the game. And I think the problem I have with what I see in announcers and the guys who talk about sports on the radio and the guys who write about it in the papers is they have things they want to write about, and it may not have anything to do with what's actually happening. I mean, when you look at Joe Colley writing the Bulls, I mean, I'd say 80% of his stuff, if not more, is Derrick Rose. I mean, and you got how many other guys are on the Bulls? You got coaches, assistant coaches, GM, 11 or 12 other players, whatever they keep on. I mean, it's not, Derrick Rose obviously is a big part of the team, but 80 or 90% of your writing?
You know what I mean? It goes back. His pattern seems to be like that. When he covered, I just flip over to Joe Colley. What's the article about? Derrick Rose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, when Joe Colley covered the White Sox, what did he do? I mean, articles, everything seemed to be about Ozzie Guillen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
So well, that's what I'm saying, though, Jim. You can't, I mean.
You cannot always focus on a personality. You need to focus on the event, the game, whatever. There's other stories.
Exactly. I mean,
What do the other players think? I mean, Derrick Rose is not the only player on the team. What about the other players? What are their feelings about? They're not even mentioned. They're not even looked at.
In some cases, as far as media contact, a lot of them appreciate. Okay, well, I don't have to talk to him.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. But I mean, if I was going to be a sports writer and I was just going to talk about Jim Leon and not talk about Rich Massaro, how would Rich feel, or how would Kevin feel if we talked about just you and we did not mention anybody else in the team or on the broadcast? Yeah. I mean, I feel slighted.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. No, there are some people who are going to feel that way, but it's. Yeah, I don't know. I think my point is, I mean, John, you're off on to another part of another piece of what I'm talking about, and it's a good point. How are people going to react to that? And I hadn't thought much about it going into the broadcast, but it's a great point. I mean, I think maybe it's something that we can talk about in the future. I guess going back to my point is just, I think the problem I have is if Jim and I watch the Ridgewood football game on Friday and we decide that, you name a player, that's going to be our storyline. We're going to talk about so-and-so. And that player in that particular game really doesn't have much of an impact, then, what good is our storyline?
What good is our storyline?
Yeah, if we're going to insist we're going to talk about player X, and player X is, a non-factor in the game, then our storyline is shot. But I think, in my mind, that's what a lot of these that's what a lot of these guys do.
I mean, that's what they get on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a legitimate storyline to follow through, and sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of storylines and just talking about specific players, we had baseball season end over the weekend. We had two players' careers end, two long careers.
Right.
We had Derek Jeter end. Derek Jeter had, if the storyline in the game was just focusing on everything that Derek Jeter did, well, Derek Jeter went out with a bang.
Well, in a case like that, where you have a couple of really outstanding players coming to the ends of their careers, I think it's legitimate that those guys should be the focus of your story.
It's always kind of funny. It always seemed like if you gave a player a day, that was the day he'd go, 0 for 4.
Well,
and make a critical error that cost you a ball game. But Derek Jeter, Friday night, his final game in Yankee Stadium, could you ask for any more of a perfect ending?
No. In fact, I had guys say, boy, we hope he doesn't play in Boston, because that's the way for him to go out. Let's just end it that way. Of course, knowing
he got drove in a run in Boston too. I think.
The other thing is, you put it this way: that is the thinking of. I'm not going to criticize that thinking. I understand where that comes from, but Derek Jeter would not be part of what makes him who he is is his mindset is not what I just mentioned. It's probably the furthest thing from his mind to say, okay, I'll go out on a high note. His whole mindset is I'm going to play the game, and I'm going to play all the games that I can, and I'm going to play them as hard and as well as I can, and that's what makes him who he is. I think if his mindset was, okay, I'm just going to go out on this high note and forget the last 3 games of the season or 4, whatever it was, then if that was part of his thinking, we might not be tipping our hats to the great career Derek Jeter had, because he might not be the same individual or player that he turned out to be.
Right.
So, that might be I'm not saying your thinking, but I'm saying your thinking in general, anybody's thinking in general, but it's not the way he thinks, and that's part of what makes him the excellent player great player
that he was. Now, we had another career end over the weekend. Paul Konerko retired after 18 years. 18 years? Yeah, 18 years in the big league, 16 years here with the White Sox. Interesting article. I just happened to glance here. John Grachowski, who kind of looks at the stats.
He's a stat guy, yeah.
He's a stat guy. Headline on the article is hell of a player, but not a hall of a player. You think Paul Konerko is a Hall of Famer?
It's a good question. I saw the headline. I looked at the paper real quick before we went on the air. Didn't get to read the article. I think some of what's going to be the deciding factor of him going in the Hall or not is he played in what we now call the steroid era, and did really well. And I think that might play in his favor. Otherwise, I think it's borderline. I think
it is, because there's a couple of tests that the Statmeisters have come up with. One they refer to as the black ink test, which draws on league leading seasons. If you look at the page in there, that's one. How many times have you led the league in runs, hits, slugging percentage, doubles, walks, whatever? Mm-hmm. The average Hall of Famer scores 27. He never led the league in anything. Paul Konerko never led the league in anything.
Yeah.
The other one that it actually is kind of an interesting test and interesting thing, and Bill James came up with this. He calls it the Hall of Fame Monitor, and it's a point system built on player accomplishments such as seasons with 40 home runs, 100 RBIs, a 300 batting average. A score of 100 indicates a likely Hall of Famer.
Okay.
Konerko scored 80. But that's the same as non-Hall of Famers like Doc Kramer, Moises Alou, Tony Perez. I thought Tony Perez was in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why I thought that.
Okay. Go ahead.
George Davis.
What the heck? George
Davis?
No.
Tony Perez, George Davis, and Tony Perez is in the Hall of Fame. Punctuation. You have to look for punctuation.
Okay.
George Davis must be around the turn of the century,
I would guess.
And Home Run Baker are in with 81. They're all Hall of Famers. Frank White has a score of 81, and he isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Who was that?
Frank White played for the Royals.
Okay, Frank White.
Jim,
what?
He's kind of a possible but not probable Hall of Famer.
You know what? I have to say, I'm thinking of a couple of names as you're talking about this. I'm pretty sure Pee Wee Reese and Phil Rizzuto are probably one or both are Hall of Famers.
Rizzuto, I know, is in the Hall of Fame. I think Pee Wee
Reese probably is too. If you're looking strictly, and all they look at here, I don't hear anything mentioned about defense, but those guys would have no offensive stats to really look at that would fit any of these categories or criteria that you're mentioning.
Bill Mazeroski's in the Hall of Fame, and he's in the Hall of Fame for his defense.
Ray Schalk. I would say this. Right. I have a friend, and we've mentioned him, and he was on one of our basketball broadcasts with me this year when you couldn't make it. Davey Rule, who just went into the 16-inch Hall of Fame this last January. And Dave was just a great defensive player and a very, how would I say it, competitive hitter. I wouldn't say he was the best hitter in the game, but he was, very competitive. And but this is what I would say. My mind, clearly, there was two guys that were teammates or guys that played for me or with me, if you want to put it that way, that were clear Hall of Famers in my mind, and both of them are in the Hall of Fame. And you can't put any stat on why they're Hall of Famers, but any guy that played with them would say there's no question they're Hall of Famers. And I think the guy, what really bothers me about this whole process of the Hall of Fame is you have a bunch of guys who saw the games and they have their criteria now, but they have no clue, basically, say, is a Paul Konerko a Hall of Famer? I would say this. You ask the guys who played with him over 17 years, is he a Hall of Famer? Those are the guys I would trust, because they're not going to BS that. You know what? If they think he's Hall of Fame, those are the guys to ask. I remember reading in the George Halas biography where the guys who played with Willie Gallimore, if you look at Willie Gallimore's stats, he never came close to 1,000 yards in a season. His career was shortened by, the fact that he died tragically in an accident. But they say the guy's a Hall of Famer because here's the thing. When that man stepped on the field, first off, there was a confidence factor on the part of his teammates. They had confidence that any time he touched the ball, he could go all the way. So that was a big boost for his team. There was the word might not be correct, but I'll use it anyway. There was a fear factor on the part of the opposing team because they had to guard against the fact that this guy could
this guy could break the
way on any play.
Run off. Yeah.
And I would say those, you could take all your stats and throw them in the garbage can. The players, the guys who play with these guys know, and they will be honest about it, who is a Hall of Famer. So the guys I would rely on the most are the guys who played the game more,
other than the sports writers who have deemed themselves the
arbiters of
morality and everything else.
Oh yeah. Well, there's another. Didn't we get into this discussion last night?
Last night.
The sports writers as arbiters of morality. You asked me. Jim asked me last night, Jen, about Barry Bonds. Is Barry, because Jim had a subject that he wanted to get onto that we haven't gotten
John's
onto
given
yet.
me the station break.
Oh, we got a station break?
Let's take a break. We'll be back.
Yeah.
You are listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on WRHS-FM 89.7 Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, October the 1st, the year 2014, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And now, back to Jim Leon and Rich Massaro and Armchair Experts.
Jim, before we get back onto the subject that we're on, as I'm listening to John introduce us very nicely, I appreciate the introduction.
Yes.
I have to say that I don't know if everybody appreciates. Now, we're sitting in John's basement, and you know what? Now, we're used to being here now. But the first time I walked in and saw the setup he had, and I think you felt the same way, I think we were both amazed and just, very much surprised at what a nice setup that John has here. And I don't think everybody realizes. I don't know how many shows John... I asked him not that long ago, and he told me, but I forgot. I don't know how many shows he does from this basement, but you know what?
10.
10
shows.
What a great I don't know. What a great job he does, and how much he lends to the station WRHS, and just how much he does for people who want to be in broadcasting in some way, shape, or form, and just help them, reach that small goal that they have of, just being on the air for a while.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we do. We really do.
So
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that.
It's an amazing thing you do, and it's an amazing setup that we see down here.
Mm-hmm.
And we still want you to do your music show, John, so Rich and I can be the wacky sidekicks.
yeah, you probably want to kick us out.
You'll
now after that.
probably regret that.
Jim, what I was saying though, your question, one of the shows one of the topics on the show you wanted to do is what makes a legend.
Yeah, that's what
tarnishes
I
a
wanted.
legend.
I wanted to get into that.
And you asked me about Barry Bonds, and I said I don't think Barry Bonds is legendary in my mind, but there's one case where he's the all-time leading home run hitter, whether you like the way he accomplished that or not. I mean, they're not going to erase that mark out of the record book. So the weight of those numbers says to me that he's a Hall of Famer. You can't. That'd be like saying, okay, we weren't going to let Babe Ruth into the Hall of Fame for whatever reason when he was the leading guy.
Because he was a drinker.
Because he was a drinker. So, but I would also say that going back to what the heck were we on, Jim? The writers being, the upholders of morality, because guys like Pete Rose that hasn't entered the Hall of Fame, and by the way, I didn't realize, even though baseball has banned him from all organized baseball activities, thank you, John, that doesn't preclude the sports writers from voting him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, yes, it does, and I was curious about that too. The Hall of Fame, in a formal vote, decided that anyone on the permanently ineligible list could not be admitted to the Hall of Fame.
The Hall of Fame decided
The Hall of Fame decided that. They made it a formal vote, and before it was just kind of an understood agreement.
Okay.
So...
But I guess my point, going back to my point, is they've decided that what Rose did was beyond was beyond the pale, and he shouldn't be in. And that Barry was Bonds recently had his first time eligible, right? And he got a low percentage of the vote.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't like what Barry Bonds did any more than anybody else. But are we going to just totally ignore those numbers? I mean, that's stupid, Jim. It's stupid. I don't agree with what he did, but I mean, they're not. I don't see him taking a number out of the book.
Is his status now? We'll talk about some others too, because you brought up some names the other day. Sammy Sosa.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a legend?
I don't know. You know what? I brought Sammy up, but there was a lot of things about Sammy that I liked. I mean, he was a guy, he ran in and out to his position all the time. I think he was a guy who wanted to play every day. There were things about Sammy I liked, but I guess my point would be he's got over 600 home runs. McGwire's got over 500. Rafael Palmeiro's got over 500. Fred McGriff was not one of the steroid guys, but he's got over 500. And I start to think to myself, now, I wouldn't put him in the same category as Dave Kingman, who I think has close to 500.
442.
442. Okay, that's a lot of home runs.
That's a lot of home runs, but Dave Kingman.
But would you say
Dave
Kingman is a Hall of Famer?
No.
So it's just, I don't know if now Jim Andrews, who was my partner way before we got back together, used to say we'd talk about Reggie Jackson. And he'd say, well, do you think Reggie's a Hall of Famer? And I said, Reggie's got over 500 homers. And Jim would say, but yeah, he's like a 269 lifetime hitter. I said, but you know what? Reggie was, I wouldn't compare, I'm not comparing him to Babe Ruth per se, but he was a big man who wasn't afraid to step on the big stage, and he performed on the big stage.
Think of that World Series.
So in my mind, he's definitely a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say that I understand what his liabilities were, but I think the man's a Hall of Famer. And his stats, as far as home runs go, are less than Sammy Sosa's. But I don't know that I would say Sammy Sosa is in the same class as Reggie Jackson. I don't think so.
I don't know, but I thought Jackson's comment, I remember reading Jackson's comment when Nelson Fox was elected to the Hall of Fame, and it was like, oh, God, they'll let anybody in here now. I said, well, okay, you may have hit over 500 home runs, but you struck out more than, like, anybody.
That's true. I remember, talk about Nellie Fox. I remember at the end of his career, he was playing with Houston, and Houston was playing the Cubs, and every Sunday we'd be at my grandfather's house, and we'd be watching either the Cubs or the Sox. And Fox was not a regular player at the time, but it was a tight game between the Cubs and Sox. And obviously, being from Chicago and Nellie having been a Chicago player for a long time, I knew who Nellie Fox was. But I don't think I understood the esteem that Nellie Fox was held in by, say, my father and my grandfather, who were not Sox fans. They were Cubs fans. But it's at the end of the game, the winning run or tying run or it's critical runs on base, and Houston sends Nellie Fox up the pinch hit. And my dad and my grandfather are like, oh, my God, no, don't send Nellie Fox up. And I'm like looking at them like, what do you mean? I mean, Nellie Fox isn't a home run hitter or anything. Why are you? They said, Nellie Fox doesn't miss the ball. I mean, he's going to get a hit and we're going to lose the game. And he came up with a pinch hit and we lost the game. And I was like, I learned a lesson that day. It's not just the guys who swing from the heels and get the big home run shots that are dangerous. What my father and grandfather saw in Nellie Fox obviously was shared in spades by the guys who had to play with him and against him, I would say Nellie Fox. I mean, Reggie Jackson didn't know that because he didn't play in the same era as Nellie Fox. But I'd say Nellie Fox, if he had that kind of how would you say it, clout or whatever you want to, if he had that kind of effect on my father and grandfather who were not anywhere involved with professional baseball, then I could imagine what esteem he was held in by his fellow players.
I mean, there are certain players that you watch for what they do. You made me think. It made me think of that when you talked about your father and grandfather watching Nelson Fox. Thinking a lot lately about my dad. Actually, tomorrow is the anniversary of the day my dad passed. Mm-hmm. If there was a Packer game on, he had to watch it because, by golly, he had to see Bart Starr.
Bart Starr.
He was a guy that he just thought was he was amazed at everything he did. And I remember the Ice Bowl game. And I happened to have to work that day at Weebolt's. And when I came home, my dad, as soon as I walked in the door, my dad had to tell me everything about this game and how Starr scored. And he said, I swear to God, he came off that field, he was crying. Mm-hmm. Well, I think he came off the field. If it looked that way, it was just because it was cold.
It was cold, probably.
His eyes were watering because it was 15 below zero. Mm-hmm. That day, but that's the kind of esteem. Now, obviously, there was no question that Bart Starr was a Hall of Famer and that, but I mean that was the kind of esteem my father had that he had to watch it, and no matter what, Bart Starr was going to win that game.
Yeah,
just like Aaron Rodgers was going to beat the Bears every time he comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the interesting thing about what you're saying, Jim, is as you're saying this, I'm thinking. And we're in a little circular argument, or not the discussion here. I'm thinking I think one of the things we were talking about last night is, or that we've talked about over the weeks that we've been on the air, is a couple things. To know the people who evaluate talent on the major league or professional level have to know what they're looking at. And not all of them actually do know. Put it this way, not all of them have the same acumen. They all know something, but it's at different levels, obviously. But Bart Starr is a guy who even back then, when the drafting was a whole lot less of an art form, was like a 17th round draft pick. That's when they still picked 20 rounds. Today, I'm thinking the way they dissect the way a guy, especially a quarterback, everything he does in terms of his mechanics, whether Bart Starr would have ever been in the NFL.
Never would have gotten a look.
If you actually give him the chance to play, obviously he can perform.
Yeah. You know, now you talk about that, the way they dissect the talent. They analyze them for not only their playing abilities, they check their, they analyze their intelligence, their psychological tests, their approach to this, the approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have things slip through the cracks.
Oh, no question about it.
I think what kind of triggered this whole idea of legends here was, a couple of weeks ago when all the NFL stuff started to fall apart. And what did we keep hearing? We kept hearing, "Oh, he's a great guy."
Mm-hmm.
It can't be true. He's a great guy. He's a great guy.
Well, do you remember, Jim, when we talked, we weren't on the subject of, you weren't on your topic of legends, but I remember one time on one of these shows, we were, just having a general discussion, and I brought up, who's the little cornerback that plays, I think he plays now for the Titans, and I think he might have started with the Bengals. And he's always in trouble, he's in the strip clubs and he's getting thrown out. I can't think of his name.
I can't think of his name either.
But we started to talk about this, and I said, we're saying, well, how could a guy like this, why would you want him on your team? But then I think as we started to talk it out, what we had said is, well, you know what? Now, he may be in trouble off the field, but what really counts for the guys,
Pac-Man Jones, is what kind of teammate is he? Is this a little guy, which he is, who'll stick his head in there, and not be afraid, who'll make plays for you, who'll back you up as a teammate? That's what the guys in the locker room or the clubhouse, whatever applies, are looking at. I don't think they're worried about, not that they don't think about it or have no concern about it, but really the most important thing for the people in the organization, especially the other players, is who is Ray Rice or whoever you want to name in terms of his relationship with his teammates. Who is he on the field? Who is he in the locker room? Yeah, and you talk about that. You go back to thought about that a few weeks ago when I saw some pictures. I think it was a 49ers reunion of some of their championship teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw Charles Haley.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Matt Millen made one of the best comments about Charles Haley. Go to war with him on the field. A complete and total rectum off the field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what counted for him was that.
Sure.
And I guess I look at this, and I guess I was tired of hearing, "Oh, he's a great guy. He's a great guy." Well, something's wrong with him. If something's wrong with him, if we've got the issue of Ray Rice, if we've got the issue of Adrian Peterson, they're not a completely great guy.
No, but who is? Nobody is.
I think of here we are in Chicago with all our sports teams. We probably had two of the greatest players in their individual sports who were the most image conscious
mm-hmm.
of themselves and extremely flawed characters.
Sure.
Walter Payton.
Right.
We didn't we didn't know about anything. We just thought Walter Payton was this perfect person, and then after the years we find out, well, he was cheating on his wife for years.
Mm-hmm.
Connie never divorced him.
Right.
But he had his image, and he upheld his image.
Mm-hmm.
We had Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan had to go away from basketball. As the story says, he retired from basketball for 2 years because David Stern was about to suspend him for his gambling.
That's what they say. I'm not sure about that, but that's possible.
That's possible. And you had all the other flaws of Michael Jordan, the fact that, for years he cheated on Juanita.
Yeah.
Well,
Jim, I think about myself in my situation when I hear about this stuff, because I say to myself, I screwed around as much as anybody. I would say, and when I say screwed around, I'm not saying anything specific, But let's put it this way: I would not call myself a choir boy by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, I thought you were.
And this is what I would say is this: I've come through all of these years with a relatively good reputation, but at the same time, there's other people who were contemporaries of ours going back to our high school days. Maybe they were a little worse, but not that much worse. And they, you know what? And they have totally different reps. And I'm like, why? Why did one thing happen for me, and something else happen for somebody else? And I mean, what do you say, Walter Payton and Michael Jordan? What was it about them that obviously the media went along with them packaging themselves as one thing? So why did that happen?
They looked at their tremendous success on the field, on the court, and that was all they needed to see.
Mm-hmm.
Walter at that time, ran for more yards than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Broke Jim Brown's record. That was the key to that.
Right.
He had the record for most yards rushed in a game.
Yeah.
We all looked at that because, no matter what, this is a Bears town. And here was the man that was going to lead us to the promised land. Unfortunately, for a good part of his career, he was surrounded by mediocre talent, and he was the only shining light on that team.
Well, think about this though, Jim. If you say you're a guy who, like either of the two guys you mentioned, and you're accessible, which both of them were to the media. You're always, even though you're maybe irritated because you're getting the same questions, you're still polite. I think you're going to get a good rep. But if you're sullen, you're surly, you're swearing at the media guys, guess what? Then you just open the barn door because they're going. The secrets they're going to keep for the guys who are polite to them, they're not keeping your secret. If you're being.
You make the jerk face like Jay Cutler does.
Yeah, then they're on you.
Then they're going to be on you.
Yeah.
Then they're going to be on you. But, I still look at it, I said, no matter what their flaws were, are these guys still legends? Yes, they're legends. Is Pete Rose a legend? Pete Rose is a legend. I don't care if he's banned from baseball and banned from the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. There's a guy who had more hits than anybody else in the major leagues. Yeah. Okay, so his fault was he bet on baseball.
Right.
And he bet on his own team, which is a violation of your contract.
It is, definitely. Well, what I find interesting, what people don't realize though, just look at it, you're talking Pete Rose. Pete Rose, just think of his persona before he even had the problem with the betting. I mean, he was betting all the time, I think, on different things.
I think he always did, yeah.
I don't think for him, at least what I've read, it didn't matter if it was baseball or anything else. That was part of his thing. But I don't think he would be Pete Rose on the field if, conversely, he didn't have these other things going on off the field. In other words, he's sort of and I'm not a psychology type of person, but whatever makes him tick on the field that you find admirable carries on off the field, and it's not always admirable. So in other words, he's competitive as can be, okay? His persona is he's competing all the way. He's hustling all the way on the field. We all love that. But he carries it over to off the field. He screws around with women who aren't his wife. He drives his car never at the speed limit. He gambles because he needs to compete. And off the field, those are all things that are not looked well on by a lot of people in society. So it's the same thing.
Cheated on his taxes and had to go to jail for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. But he is. But the thing that made him so great on the field screwed him up off the field because that motor was running all the time. Same thing with Babe Ruth. I mean, Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan, for two, probably slept less hours in their life than any two people that you could name, okay? Because they were constantly living. I mean, when you read about a guy like Jordan, I mean, they said that Magic Johnson, who was also a guy who burned the candle at both ends,
right,
They said when they got to the Olympics, and was that Spain, the first dream team? Barcelona, I think?
Yeah.
He said the first day they got there, he said they practiced. Then Jordan, everybody went out and they played like 18 or 36 holes of golf because he couldn't just play 18. They went out and ate. They came back. They played cards all night. Okay, never slept. They went to practice the next day, went to the golf course, came back, played cards. Now they still hadn't slept, and now Jordan's ready to do this the third day. And finally Magic said, wait a minute, I can't do it. He goes, you could go ahead and do it, but I can't do it anymore. The man didn't sleep.
There was I happened to glance at something on Facebook, and you made me think of a story here. Tom Dreesen, who opened for Sinatra for many years, he said that after they did a show in Vegas, and they went back to Sinatra's suite, and there's a big party going on, and you do the late show. It's 5-6 o'clock in the morning, and finally Dreesen gets up, and Sinatra says, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to my room. I'm going to bed." He goes, "What for?" He said, "Well, I have to get up in the morning, and I have to go to the cemetery to visit some people." Visit some people? Who are you going to visit in the cemetery? And Dreesen said, "All the guys that died trying to keep up with you."
That's good. Yeah.
He said Sinatra roared, and he would make him tell that story every time he did that.
See, I would say if you, I would be willing to put a little money on this. If you look at guys who you would say were exceptional livers in whatever field you want, your great athletes, your great generals, your most famous political figures, businessmen, whatever, I would say the one attribute that they had that maybe they shared is they were so wound up in life that they weren't even, sleeping sometimes became a necessity, but that wasn't the first thing they were thinking about. As you say, Frank Sinatra, I'm sure there was many times when, he might have gone 36, 48 hours without sleeping, and probably your Pattons and your Eisenhowers and your whoever, John F. Kennedys or whoever you want to name. Those guys were all guys who they were caught up in living, and I think they all had that in common, or for the most part they did. So
going back, I think let's go back and focus. I'm trying to figure out to focus on
the legends.
The legends and the two players that kind of triggered all this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Ray Rice was ever going to be a quote legendary running back. If you looked at his stats and you had to look at the numbers, the last two seasons prior to this, there was a decline in his production. Maybe he was quote the nice guy, and that made him a great face of his franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were allegedly the stories that Baltimore said, leave, we don't want to get rid of him because, he's doing commercials for the bank that sponsors the state, that has their name on the stadium. We don't want to upset him. Even though John Harbaugh said after he saw it, get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of him. Is he ever going to be a legend? Is he ever going to come back? Is he ever going to be a legend? No. Is he ever going to come back? Who knows?
Uh-huh.
So Adrian Peterson, everybody has basically said, I think I saw an item on the internet yesterday. They said, forget Adrian Peterson this season.
Mm-hmm.
Was he on that route to be legendary? Was he on the route to be one of those supreme backs and supreme players in the National Football League? Yeah, I think so.
Oh, definitely.
I think so.
I would say.
Is he going to regain that status? Who knows?
Well, put it this way, this is you know what? I don't want to get off your subject because let's stay on your subject. You brought up a question that's leading away from your subject, actually, Jim. The thing that you said is because I was going to say why he's not going to get back on track, but that's off your subject.
No, okay. Why isn't he going to get back on track?
Well, you know what? He already overcame a serious injury,
knee injury,
which
right.
cost him some time in rehab and whatnot,
and recovered very quickly from
he did.
It too.
But I think if he has another year of being idle, and he wasn't idled by that injury except for the end of the season where he was hurt. But I just think at this point in his career, it would be very hard for him to come back
After a year off.
as the same person that he was.
Yeah.
You know, I would say this too. Things can change, and they always do. But the way professional sports is set up and run today, I think it's so much more corporate than it was. And they are so image conscious that actually you're not going to see that many legendary characters. I mean, in sports today, if you could combine all four of the major sports, what I'll call the major sports, baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, if you could come up with 10 legendary names from all four sports, I'm not talking about 10 in each sport, I'm talking about 10 from all four sports, I think you'd be lucky.
Playing right now?
Right. You're not going to come up with 10 because there's not 10. Okay, you're going to have LeBron James in basketball. Kobe Bryant is on the end of his career, but he'd be in that category. So that's 2 from basketball.
Sidney Crosby
from hockey.
Maybe Patrick Kane down the road.
Possible down the road. In football, you've got the quarterbacks. You got Brady, you got Manning, you've got Rodgers.
Brady and Manning, both near the end of their career.
Right.
And a lot of people wondered if the end is starting for Brady after last night.
Yeah. And then what's the other? You got baseball. You got probably Derek Jeter.
His career is over.
So,
but you look at who's still around in the game. Pujols.
Mm-hmm. Pujols. Yeah, but I'm saying
you're right.
You're not having a lot of names pop up that you consider possibly legendary characters.
No, I mean we talked about one of the things we talked about yesterday was who would you pay to go see? You know, who's worth dropping the money down for a ticket to go see him play? Well, I mean, I'd pay money to go see LeBron.
Yeah. LeBron would be one.
You know, I mean, I remember for a stretch there, I always wanted to see, for about a 3-year stretch, I always wanted to see Dr. J play.
Oh wow,
Julius Erving, and for a 3-year stretch, every time I bought tickets, Dr. J was injured.
Really, I actually got to see him play. So.
I mean, the last game that I found out that Dr. J was injured, I gave my tickets to a kid in the mailroom at Draper and Kramer when I was working there, and he was thrilled.
Well, that's one of the names you brought up, Michael Jordan. I used to tell people when Michael Jordan was playing, Jim Kelly, I'd have coffee with all the time, and I'd say, well, you know what, they should pay Michael Jordan whatever he wants. And I said, everybody else in the league should get the minimum. And he'd say, well, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, you could prove that Michael Jordan, when he goes to this city, and this city, there's more people that come to see the game than when other teams visit. Or when, And I said, actually, he's basically the face of the league. He's huge for the league. He's not the league per se, but you could say in a marketing sense he's the league.
Right.
And everybody else is not doing the same thing that he's doing. So you could probably say, hey, why do I have to pay you Michael Jordan money for? I mean, right. It's I wouldn't do it. And that's what I meant, because I go back to Bill Veeck, and I understand today you got a whole different ball game. It's not the people that pay to get in that are paying the big salaries. You got TV money, you've got all of the, the is paraphernalia right?
Yeah,
apparel, I guess.
Apparel. Paraphernalia, all the other ancillary stuff besides just a uniform.
Right. But I think the basic his basic premise is still right. Who do people want to see? And if you who are those guys that people actually are excited to see?
Mm-hmm.
And, when a Bears fan today goes to see, say, a Bears game, and this is no knock on any of the players, there might be somebody who said, I really like Lance Briggs or Charles Tillman or Jay Cutler or whatever, and there'll be a handful that will go because they like those guys and they'll watch those guys. But there's not a star like Walter Payton or Dick Butkus where everybody is, you know what, I want to see Dick Butkus play just once in my life. And they'll, or Walter Payton, whatever. And I actually was able to see both of those guys play in person at least once in my life. But there's not that guy. I would have put Brian Urlacher in that category. Say, people would say, "Hey, I want to see Brian Urlacher." Now, I think he was in that. Put it this way: if he wasn't at the top of that food chain, he was close to it. Another guy that just recently retired, and the NFL did a lot to, how would you say, sanitize his reputation, was Ray Lewis.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he was a preeminent player,
yeah.
One that you probably want to go see once before he got through with his career.
Yeah.
And I think what happens a lot of times is that it doesn't dawn on us till these guys are well into their careers. You know what? Maybe I'd like to see that guy once before he stops playing.
Yeah. I was you mentioned getting a chance to see Butkus. Had a chance to see Butkus play. I had a chance to see Gale Sayers play his greatest game.
Oh, wow. You were there?
I was there. The 6 touchdown game.
I
also was there the day he blew out his knee the first time.
Okay.
Against the 49ers.
The great Gale Sayers.
Oh, man. There's a guy, if he stayed healthy, Walter Payton would still be trying to catch his record.
Now, here's one for you, Jim. Gale Sayers probably played, I'm going to guess, 5 or 7 years in the league.
5 years.
5 years. Sandy Koufax probably, now he had a longer career, but he probably really had 5 or 6 preeminent years.
Right.
Both of those guys, nobody would even dispute the fact that they're Hall of Famers, but they're Hall of Famers on a very small sampling of years. But
right.
You know what? I'll again go back to my argument of now everybody could see their brilliance, but you know what? You had to be exceptionally good if you were voted based on that short of a period of time in the Halls of Fame.
Right.
And so it goes back to a little bit to my idea of Gale Sayers. When you look at it, he had the record for the 6 touchdowns in a game. Everybody could see his talent. But if you didn't know who Gale Sayers was, right, you never saw him play, and you were just going to take the criteria these guys use and look at stats, he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
No way. He's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I think he might have rushed for 1,000 yards in a season once.
No, a couple of times.
Couple of times, okay.
Couple of times. I think he had that. And probably the most amazing season he had was the first time when he came back after his knee surgery. Ran for over 1,000 yards, and I don't believe he had a run longer than 20 yards that year. That might have been it.
Yeah.
That might have been it. So, that's pretty amazing. John, you want us to leave?
Oh, wow.
You ready? And John throws up his hands like, hey, you want to talk? You can talk. If you're not,
we don't want to take up your time, John.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, we had a lot of fun today.
Yeah.
Good conversation. Good conversation among the three of us. Chime in more often there, Mr. DeVita. We appreciate all you do for us. We thank you for listening. Homecoming this Friday night at Ridgewood.
Hey, and let's thank Mr. Zaflik as well, because you know what? He's the guy who really, for all of us, I think, here, got the ball rolling.
You got it. You got it. Thanks to him, too. We give him grief, but we love him.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. We're out of here.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, October the 1st on 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with the WRHS sports announcers Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita. Our audio engineer is James Rohde. Radio station manager is Kevin Zefalik. Executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network is John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, September the 30th, the year 2014. Until next time, be safe and thanks for listening.